When we added MDMA,
What will you do?
went up to 61%.
Hell yes.
But I saw a bird that morning.
You made the first blues in 200 years.
You probably can't tell by looking at me, but I'll be a good ally when the apocalypse happens. I mean, I'm pretty resourceful. I have some emergency candles under my kitchen sink, a flashlight that doesn't need batteries, and this might be my most important skill, I know how to use sticks to make both fire and clothing because I'm a knitter. So I'm just saying, if the apocalypse happens and you need a friend with skills, I might be that friend. But speaking of skills, there's a skilled movement happening, a maker movement. Makers are independent, innovative tinkerers, people who use raw materials to create products and market them. We're talking everything from upcycled steel desks to 3D printed jewelry to hand-knit sweaters, and really everything in between. Up until about the late 1700s, making things was something we did out of necessity. We were intimately connected to almost every part of the process. If we didn't make something ourselves, we most likely knew who did. But with the Industrial Revolution came sweeping change. Suddenly we could rely on machines to more quickly and cheaply produce the things we needed. Mass production shifted the value we had for things because they were both so easy to come by and so easy to replace. But it also shifted our appreciation for process. We became much more focused on the end result, but not really how we got there. But now we're seeing the Industrial Revolution come full circle. Thanks to advances in technology and the power of the internet, workmanship has taken on a whole new meaning. Old techniques are being revived, and now terms like artisan and handmade are symbols of quality. Online marketplaces that focus on handmade products and local businesses that do the same are helping makers to find an audience for their work. Even companies like Amazon are getting in on the action with Amazon Handmade. So this maker thing, it's kind of a big deal, and it's changing the way consumers buy and behave. But why would we be willing to spend a little more, maybe wait a little longer, and accept variations that can be inherent to the handmade process? Why? Because makers are helping us to shift what we value. But I don't just want to tell you what makers are accomplishing, I want to tell you why it's working, and how anyone, whether you're a maker or not, can take a page out of the maker playbook. First, makers excel with limited resources. When it comes to deciding on a goal and setting out to achieve it, we can get really caught up in all of the components that we feel like we need in order to get the results we want. But what the maker movement is teaching us is that having limited resources, having limited experience, these don't have to be barriers to success. What we've seen in big business is having all the resources at your disposal doesn't necessarily make your work stand out. How many times have we seen a successful company release a product that fell flat and nobody bought it? We've seen it, right? Looking at a pile of grocery bags, you might think, how do I get rid of these? These need to be recycled. Or you might look at that pile of plastic grocery bags and think, you know what these would be good for? Crocheted sleeping mats for the homeless. Someone had that idea, and now it's a reality that benefits others. Adding creativity to any problem expands our ability to be resourceful. And in turn, being resourceful allows our creativity to grow. So it's not really about what you have, it's about how you use what you have. So when you're lacking resources, think like a maker. Makers also collaborate and network. In a world where industry is so often defined by competition, today's makers are doing something a little bit different, and it's working. The group Rising Tide Society was formed a few years ago in response to the isolation that is so often part of the experience of being a creative entrepreneur. The opportunity to collaborate and connect with other makers and creative entrepreneurs means having the ability to share ideas and resources, and to share the struggles of the process along the way. Their once-a-month meetings have grown around the world as their message of community over competition has resonated with creative entrepreneurs. Their mission is simple: to be a hub and an educational resource for the creative economy. Makerspaces, too, have popped up in response to the number of artisans who need room to work. While some makers, like me, can work from the comfort of home, others need room to work. Makerspaces provide access to tools, many of which might otherwise be cost prohibitive, especially if you're just getting started. Makerspaces provide a home for guitar makers and tiny house builders and co-working and blacksmithing and so much more. And what's different about a makerspace versus old school industry is that while everyone's working in the same space, they're doing it independently and on their own schedule. It's been said that it takes a village to raise a child, but I would offer that it takes a village to accomplish any really meaningful, huge goal. Opportunity to collaborate and network is a way to create that village for yourself. Makers are also perpetual students. Whether it's a handmade piece of furniture that requires researching a new technique or teaching yourself a new computer language so you can get the results you want with a video game design. Sometimes we have to hit the books and we have to experiment to reach the goals we're setting out for. The thing about makers is they don't always know everything they need to know before they begin. In fact, I'm willing to bet that most of us are knee-deep in the process and still asking questions. And the truth is, we'll never know the answer to all of our questions until we get to them anyway. So many questions come up along the way. You don't have to be a maker to recognize the value of bravely, boldly going forward to accomplish your goal, but learning along the way. Makers also teach what they know. My grandmother taught me to knit when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and she told me it was my mission to teach others so that the art would continue. She practically had me convinced that I might be the last knitter on earth. That turned out not to be true, but I took that mission seriously. I taught anyone and everyone who would sit still long enough to learn, and I still do. If you spend any time with makers or creative people, or you follow them on social media, you'll see that they are often willing to share what they know. They'll demonstrate techniques, they'll share little snippets of their process. This not only engages and inspires their audience, but it also ensures that the art will continue. Sometimes we don't think of teaching others as a tool for our own success, but it can open doors that might otherwise never open to you. Makers also get a little personal. One of the reasons we're falling in love with process again, and we're developing this renewed appreciation for quality, is because makers, thanks to technology, are inviting us behind the scenes to experience what they do up close. This means we can feel better about maybe spending a little more for a handmade product because it means supporting the work of someone we admire. Big business might be able to replicate the look of a handmade product, not quite, but close, but they can't compete with the story of an independent artist. So if there's something you're setting out to do and you're trying to connect with your audience in a new way, try inviting them behind the scenes. Get a little personal so they can fall in love with you and the work that you're doing. Makers also think forward. Dana Blair first visited Peru as a 22-year-old American anthropology student. She fell in love with the people and the culture, but she quickly realized that industrialization was destroying the livelihood of the people in the village of Cusco. Not only that, but their ancient artisan practices were also at risk of being lost. Dana was inspired to create a Kickstarter campaign and to start a small business called Pachinku. This was to allow the artisans in Cusco to continue their long tradition of using plants to dye, but instead of textiles, which were being replaced by industrial methods, Dana suggested dyeing yarn for knitters and crocheters, something which had broader consumer appeal and could potentially establish a new livelihood. They've taken advantage of a few modern advancements, but most of what Dana and her team do today is the same way it's been done for centuries. From gathering the plants in remote areas, to dyeing the yarn over an open fire, to rinsing and washing and cleaning and winding, there is a lot of love and labor that goes into every simple-looking ball of yarn. But because of this cultural shift we're experiencing, away from quick, cheap, and easy, and instead embracing thoughtful, handmade, small batch products, people like Dana and her team are able to find their audience in a worldwide market. Today's makers, they don't have all the resources necessarily. Maybe they don't have the experience. Maybe they're not the right age. Maybe they're not in the right location, and it doesn't matter. On paper, it doesn't seem like it should work, but it does. So think about this as you're staring down a goal or reaching toward a new project or a new business or a new venture. What are some ways that you can take from this maker mindset and benefit the work that you're trying to do? Maybe you have limited resources. So what? Remember, sometimes it's what you don't have that helps you innovate. Don't be afraid to collaborate. You don't have to do everything by yourself. Sometimes that outside perspective can make a huge difference in the way you see your own work. Be willing to keep learning and keep asking questions. Don't wait till you have everything figured out, because you'll never get there. Get started and ask and learn along the way. Be willing to share what you know. Generosity paves the way to success. And be willing to get a little personal. Invite your audience behind the scenes so they can fall in love with the work that you're doing. And don't forget to think forward. When you run into an obstacle, think long term, look around it. Sometimes it's the slightest tweak. That's all you need to go from a failing venture to a success. You don't have to be a maker to think like one. You don't have to be crafty to be creative. Whether you're trying to change the world, save the world, maybe from an apocalypse, or just trying to accomplish a personal goal, thinking like a maker can help you get there. Thank you.